I'm often asked to recommend interesting side dishes. It seems that people have their favorite methods of cooking chicken and beef and fish and so on, but they're stumped as to what to serve with it beyond mashed potatoes or boring rice. On today's show, I'm going to show you 3 great side dishes that would go with almost any menu. First up, I'm going to show you how to make fragrant rice. It's a delicious concoction that's sort of Middle East inspired, dancing with a little fringe of Morocco maybe, and it's so good with all sorts of different proteins. We're going to start with sauteing some aromatics, and that usually refers to anything, helps if we plug it in, anything that adds flavor at the beginning of a dish, like garlic and ginger and so on. And obviously we want something to fry it in, so we're going to start with a little canola oil. And we've got some finely minced shallots. As I've mentioned before, I really like using them because it's great if you only need a couple of tablespoons. You mince up 1 shallot and you don't have half an onion to deal with. And they don't need much cooking because their flavor isn't too strong. I've also got some minced ginger. And sometimes I get asked why chefs prefer to chop ginger instead of using garlic, instead of using a garlic press. And that's because they believe that more of the oils stay with the garlic. It's up to you. The press sure is quick and easy. And here is our ginger. So those are common to lots of different cuisines, but the minute you see ginger, you know that you're perhaps not in a traditional European flavor profile. And we'll just give that a little stir. And we'll let it start to simmer. Next up, we're going to chop the really important ingredient for this dish, or grate it, and that's turmeric root. And you may see powdered turmeric. It's what gives things a really nice, bright, vibrant yellow hue, and it's also great for anti-inflammatory properties, but the root's really nice to work with as well. So I'm just going to grate it here. You can see, if the camera's showing, how vibrant and yellow it is. And as with grating garlic, you don't need to peel it because the peel just sort of disintegrates. It's a lot drier than garlic, so it's easy to get it off the grater. And however much you like to use is fine. You could use about half as much of powdered if you're going that route. And the reason that we fry all these things first is that it sets the base flavor layer before we add in the next ingredients. So next up, we're going to chop some cauliflower. Often when it's really finely chopped, it's called cauliflower rice, which is sort of a new term. But if you look at the way it breaks up, it's in little tiny bits that are sort of like the size of rice. Don't have to worry too much about what size it ends up for this dish. But you just want to make it fairly uniform. And I'll start adding it in as we complete sections here, just so that the pot starts to fill up and everything cooks evenly. In this dish, this part of the process can definitely be done ahead of time in terms of frying the aromatics and the cauliflower, and then you can cook the rice a little bit later on. A few years ago, when cauliflower was the it vegetable of the year, it had a spike in price due to demand. Thankfully, that has passed, and now it's back to where it belongs in the price spectrum. And it's something that you can find all winter long, and it's extremely versatile. So we're looking for about a cup of finely chopped cauliflower for the dish. Anytime I can sneak extra vegetables into a dish without my family being aware of it, I'm pretty happy. In this case, I think that they think they're just having some kind of fancy rice and they don't realize that the cauliflower is necessarily in there. Chop up a couple more bits. We're going to use basmati rice because I really like the flavor of it. It's a little bit nutty and it cooks very nicely, and the grains don't tend to get too clumpy. So that's why it's my basmati of choice. If you choose brown rice, be aware that it takes a lot longer to cook, particularly brown basmati, even if it's been toasted beforehand. Okay, I think that's enough, so we'll just let this saute for another moment. And now we're going to add the rice and also let it saute for a minute. It's equivalent to toasting the rice before you cook it, especially for brown rice. So by coating it in oil, it helps it start its cooking process and it's absorbing the flavors that are already in the pot. Okay. We'll give it a shake to even it out. Then we're going to add, we have 3/4 cup of rice, so we're going to add 1.5 cups of water. You could use regular long grain white rice if that's what you prefer. This dish would still be fantastic with that. Give it a stir. And as with all rice preparations, we're going to turn the heat up and bring it to a boil. And then as soon as it's boiling, we're going to turn it down low and let it cook for about 15 minutes. So we'll just keep an eye on the pot for that. While it's cooking, we'll get ready for what's going to come next, which is some chopped herbs, parsley and mint. Just clean off our knife here. A little bit of a mess. I'll just turn it up so we can get that to a boil more quickly. This dish would be great if you were making something that had similar flavors as in mint in it. It would be nice, for example, with lamb, which goes so well with mint. I've even seen dishes of chicken that have been prepared with mint. But it's great standalone too with just plain protein preparations. Okay, so I can see now it's just starting to simmer. So I'll finish chopping this mint and then we'll put the lid on and let it cook for about 15 minutes. Try to resist the urge to check rice when it's cooking. Every time you take the lid off, you're losing some of the trapped steam, and that's going to affect the finished product. Okay, so we're going to turn it down, and we'll check it in 15 minutes. All right, we've got our mint all ready. We're going to check on our rice. Looks pretty good, nice and fluffy. Turn the heat off. And we'll just get the rest of our add-ins ready. You can see, as I've mentioned in the past, I love using fresh herbs. It's such a great way to add a lot of color and flavor to any dish. And if you just make a habit of using them, then you'll find that they don't go to waste in your fridge. People often complain, oh, I bought it to make one dish and then didn't use the rest of it. If you're finding that's happening repeatedly, share them with your neighbors or chop them up and freeze them in water or oil, and then you can add them to other dishes. They won't be that nice garnish on top because they'll be mushy, but they still have all the flavor and can be stirred in during the cooking time. All right, and then we're going to add some fresh lemon juice. As you may know, I'm a big fan of that as well for its bright color. This one's really dense. Hopefully that means it's really juicy. I think it is. There we go. Okay, so we'll get our serving bowl over here. And we'll scoop out the rice. I just love the way the turmeric gives it that color. It's just fantastic. Some people say they find the flavor of it a little bitter. That's not been my experience. Perhaps they're using too much. It could also be old. Spices do start to change when they get older. But with the fresh root, you're never going to have that problem. Now we're going to stir in our lemon juice. And we're going to stir in a couple other delightful little things. We've got some toasted slivered almonds. Nuts are really common in Middle Eastern and North African cuisines, and also some slivered dried apricots. And these are kind of like the nice little candy surprise in the middle of the dish. I'll put half the mint and half the parsley in there. And really you just need to poke it down into the dish. You don't actually have to stir it. It's just a matter of making sure it's evenly distributed so whoever is getting served last will still find all the goodies in the bottom. There we go. And more parsley and mint on top. And now you've got a beautiful side dish that is as aromatic or fragrant, since it's called Fragrant Rice, as it is pretty to look at.
Carrots are one of the most versatile vegetables around. Not only are they nutritious, but they can add a big pop of color and flavor to any menu. Roasting is one of the best ways to bring out their natural sweetness, and coming up next, I'm going to show you a really impressive way to serve up roasted carrots. Fancy enough for a dinner party, but easy enough for a quick weeknight meal too.
Great garnishes can elevate any side dish, or soups or salads, really anything at all. If nuts aren't an option, consider some great alternatives like crispy chickpeas, popped wild rice, which you can do in a frying pan with just a little tiny bit of oil, or crispy tortilla strips. They're all crunchy and delicious. I love the look of carrots on almost any plate, but let's face it, they can get a little boring sometimes. However, I've got the solution. We'll start with these beautiful French cut carrots that you can buy at Costco and at a lot of the big grocery stores. They're peeled, but they're actual real carrots. They're not mechanically pulverized like some of those little baby carrots. So we're going to start by cutting them in half lengthwise. And I leave the little green ends on, partly because it lets people know that they are real carrots, and also they're actually really tender and sweet and edible. A lot of restaurants will serve carrot greens, for example, or they'll even make a pesto out of carrot greens, so they're entirely edible, and it's kind of a fun surprise if your guests are polite enough to follow your lead as the host, and they see you eating the ends, and they try them, they'll like them. We're going to put them out on a baking sheet. The other nice thing about these is that they're fairly uniform in size, which means they're going to cook evenly and consistently. Put a couple more on our sheet here. And again, for the make-ahead tip, you can certainly cut them and just cover the pan with a towel or saran so that it doesn't dry out. All right. So before we roast them, we're going to brush them with a little bit of olive oil. And I find this easiest if you just have a little vessel of it and just go down the length of each carrot. This helps to bring out the natural sugars in the carrot as it heats and also keeps them from getting dried out. My husband suggested taking the carrots and dunking them in oil, and while that might be efficient, I think it would make them too oily. Surprisingly, vegetables that have too much oil on them don't get as crispy in the oven. You would think that they would, based on the principle of deep frying, but that's not the case. So if you're doing roasted potatoes, for example, less is more when it comes to the oil. There we go. And a little bit of salt and pepper, and that's all they need. If you want to work on a certain flavor profile to go with a meal, you could add cumin to this. That would be great. Crushed coriander seeds would also be really nice, but I'm going old school today. The reason I have salt in a grinder is then I can use the coarse kosher salt, and it is not as heavily iodized as some other salts, and often it has none at all, so it's better for you. We don't need iodine because we get it in our processed foods. So now this is going to go in the oven for about 15 minutes, and when it comes out, we're going to put a nice glaze on top and send it back for another quick trip to the oven. All right, our carrots are par roasted. They're about 2/3 of the way there. You can see they don't shrink up too much, which is great. And now we're going to add our delicious glaze. So I've got some honey in here, and I did microwave it just for about 5 seconds to soften it, just because that speeds things up, makes it a little easier to blend with our Dijon. And we'll just give this a little whisk. It makes a really, really nice, sort of a tangy glaze. The combo of the mustard and the honey complements the sweetness of the carrots really nicely. And we've got our brush again here to get it on. Same thing, just a little swipe down the middle of each one. And when it goes back in the oven, you'll get a bit more caramelization. The glaze might even start to get a little bit golden brown on top, and it just makes them look even more tempting. So once you've put the glaze on, they just need about 5 more minutes in the oven. And while that's happening, we're going to prepare our plate, because with the layering concept with flavors, we're going to put some flavor underneath the carrots as well as what we're doing on top of the carrots. So there we go. They're all nicely glazed. Trying to keep that brush from flying through the air. And so it'll be back into the oven for 5 more minutes, and then you can see me prep the plate and put the carrots on it. All right, we've got our carrots out of the oven now. Don't they look beautiful? They're just gleaming with that beautiful glaze on them. So now we're going to prep our plate. What I've got here is some mascarpone cheese. You could also use just cream cheese if you prefer. And we're going to add just a tiny bit of balsamic vinegar to that. And that's going to be the smear on the plate underneath. And I know the word smear sounds kind of weird, but that's the lingo they use in restaurants. And if you take a look at restaurant plates, they probably don't spill it on their serving tray though, they often will put something underneath on a dish just to add to the appearance. And it's a really great way to make something at home look more elegant. If your cheese is not quite stirrable, as mine is today, you can also put it in the microwave, but just for 5 seconds or less at a time to soften it. I'm just going to use a little elbow grease to get it going here. There we go. So now our balsamic is mixed in. If you want lily white cheese, you could use a white balsamic instead, but I would just avoid the ones that have a really sweet flavor to them because you've got a lot of sweet already with the carrots. So the easiest way to do this, I am not a master at this technique by any means. I'm so impressed when you watch food TV how they just swoosh it down the plate. But if you start within the middle, just kind of push it in one direction, push it in the other direction, and then even it out. And then that's just going to be the bed on which the carrots sit. And then when people go to serve themselves, you just encourage them to scoop right up from the bottom to get some of that. And then you just want to take a second to arrange the carrots in a pretty way. They're really, really hot, so obviously take care as you're picking them up. And I just love the idea of bringing this to the table instead of a bowl of steamed carrot sticks or something. I think it's fun to surprise people with a presentation that they're not expecting. These would taste absolutely wonderful in a bowl, mind you, but it's nice, like I said, to take the extra moment. And if you're serving, if it's a dinner party, it shows your guests that you care enough about them to take the time to make the dish look really, really pretty. There we go. There are beautiful glazed French cut carrots.
Most of us don't tend to serve raw vegetables unless they're in a salad bowl, but I'm trying to change that. Coming up next, I've got a gorgeous dish that showcases the color and flavor of a variety of vegetables in a really unique and appealing way. Don't be surprised if your guests want to photograph this dish before they eat it.
For our next dish today, I can't wait to show you how beautiful raw vegetables can be. I know you're thinking raw vegetables, right, as a side dish? But think about it. We eat carrot sticks, celery sticks. This is a whole new ball game. Root vegetables are great raw, and I'm going to show you how to arrange them in a really nice way. So we're going to start with a variety of washed peeled vegetables. I've got a candy cane beet, a white turnip, watermelon radish, golden beet, regular beet, green and yellow zucchini, and carrot. Now you can cut these with a knife, a nice sharp knife on a board, or you can use a mandolin. So I'm just going to use the mandolin for some of them, and then I'm going to do the rest with a knife. And safety first with this, because of course it's super, super sharp. You want them to be fairly thin, and then we're going to arrange them in a pretty pattern on our board. So sometimes it's fun to intersperse them, or you can just do rows of each color, and that's really nice as well. And I think we'll do the turnip next. Make sure it's locked into that holder. It certainly is fast if you're comfortable working with the mandolin. I'm amazed when I see how fast some restaurant chefs can fly through a pile of vegetables. And the carrot's tall enough that I think I can cut it without the holder. Oops, it's getting a little jammed there on the corner. There we go. We'll do a few extra carrots because they're a little bit smaller. There we go. I usually flip it upside down when I'm not using it, and that way the blade is not exposed, so I don't have to worry about accidentally knocking it with my hand. This is also a really fun dish to serve up during cocktail hour before you sit down for dinner, because people can just kind of nibble away at it while they're having a drink. And I think we'll do some green zucchini next. I'm just looking at the colors on our plate and want to make sure that we have nice variety. And these are all vegetables that you can get pretty much from, I would say, October through to March or April. So it's nice to have something fresh and crispy in the middle of winter when we're getting used to a lot more of our winter vegetables like cauliflower and frozen peas and that kind of thing. And in terms of make ahead for this, you can easily cut your vegetables and lay them out and then wrap it well in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge until you're ready to put the dressing on. We'll try our candy cane beet next. These are just fun because the color's so vibrant on them. I'm just going to trim the end of that one. You don't have to spend a fortune if you're looking for a mandolin. This one was online and it wasn't super expensive, but the blade is nice and sharp, and I like the safety feature of this holder, which is really robust. Aren't these pretty? There we go. And we'll do the other beet, which is going to go on the end. And then we'll do the yellow zucchini. Oh, we've forgotten our golden beet too. I'm going to definitely have to make everything cozier on this plate. There we go. Tuck these in here. Golden beets are great on a variety of plates because they don't stain everything else around them the way that ordinary purple beets do. Sometimes I talk about working with beets as though it looks like a crime scene in your kitchen. And I think we'll just skip our yellow zucchini because our platter is so full and so gorgeous. So now we're going to make our dressing. And we're going to have our olive oil, which I'll just set aside for a moment, fresh lemon juice, which is perfect for a simple vinaigrette. As you can probably tell, I go through a lot of lemons, but as I've mentioned before, they're healthy and really not that expensive for what they add to your dishes. If you're going to spend money on good ingredients, you might as well go that extra step and buy the things to go with them that will make them shine. Our lemon, and for most vinaigrettes you want something to emulsify it to make everything stick together, meaning that the oil and the acid will not separate. So we're going to put in a little bit of Dijon mustard. We'll add salt and pepper, and this way the salt will dissolve in the acid before the oil gets involved. If you wanted some heat, this would be the time to add some chili pepper or even some smoked paprika if you wanted to change the flavor a little. So we give that a shake. And then we add our oil. When you shake it by hand like this, you end up with a really nice light vinaigrette. If you wanted something that was creamier and thicker, you could whisk it with an immersion blender. And that just changes the texture a little bit, but it doesn't really affect the flavor. Now you want to drizzle the dressing on pretty much right before you're ready to serve so that the vegetables don't start to get kind of cooked a little bit by the acid. And it's this simple. You just do a nice drizzle on each row. Looks like that was just about the perfect amount of dressing. There we go. Make sure everybody's got some. And then you want to finish with some fresh herbs. Chopped basil is really nice. I've got some nice fresh thyme here, and I like the way that the little leaves look on top. And we're just going to scatter them. And when it comes time to eat this dish, you can offer people little crackers to put the vegetables on, and that's kind of a nice vehicle, and it soaks up the vinaigrette. Or you can assemble little individual plates, which are really, really pretty, and have them as a sit-down appetizer at the beginning of the meal. Or once again, even an individual side dish for everybody. There's our raw root vegetable carpaccio, showing winter vegetables in all their glory. With a little creativity and planning, you can make beautiful side dishes that will elevate any meal. Just don't forget the garnishes, like I almost did with the pistachio topping on these gorgeous French cut roasted glazed carrots. You can also make beautiful fragrant rice that's colorful and delicious, and this gorgeous root vegetable carpaccio. Side dishes to swoon over.